great pleasure to welcome to the stage Gethin Nadin. Gethin has a very long and very powerful CV, which I'm not going to attempt to read out. He can give you his own introduction if you like. Here he is. Welcome to the stage, Gethin. Gethin is the Director of Employee Wellbeing at Benefex, and he's going to share some of his own experience, but also some of the practical things that we can do, and then we'll move into the break after that. So Gethin, thank you, over to you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm pleased to be one of many Welsh people at the event today, so loving to continue that trend. So I have some slides, so if we could bring those slides up, please, Scott. I think one of the things I first wanted to talk about that I feel quite strongly about is that in order to create safe spaces, we need to kind of first acknowledge that there's still a problem with the way that we treat each other. And I think I'll put that on the next slide. Pandemics aside, the last 12 months have surfaced growing inequalities in our society, and events have been brought to the surface of kind of a few long-standing issues with regards to how we treat people based on things like their gender or skin color. So we saw throughout the pandemic that there's been a global surge in anti-Asian discrimination. The murder of George Floyd and Sarah Everard drew global attention to the way we treat Black people and women in our society. And I think specific attention needs to be paid to younger employees who the data say are struggling most by growing up and working in a society that isn't as accepting as we might think. And so while I'd love to talk more about how we treat women and Black employees at work, because that's not my lived experience, I'll be focusing on what has been my experiences as an LGBTQ plus employee at work and why I needed a safe space. Now, I've written quite a bit about women and Black employees in the workplace, so I'm happy to share that with anyone who'd like to read or listen to any of that content. But I think it's important that we realise the pervasiveness of hate crimes and the physical violence is a constant source of stress for many people living within the LGBTQ plus community. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for people under the age of 24, and LGBTQ plus youth contemplate suicide at almost 3 times the rate of straight people. And 40% of transgender adults say they've attempted to take their own life, and 92% say they attempted to do this before the age of 25. And feeling like you have to have your guard up all the time is exhausting and emotionally taxing. And for those who experience even minor homophobia, show increased production of the stress hormone cortisol. So while the situation's got much better for people like me, when it comes to the crunch, there's still so much more work to do. And employers have a growing responsibility of the well-being of their people to create these safe spaces. According to some of the latest study out towards the end of last year, 92% of people state that they are totally or fairly comfortable with gay or bisexual men or lesbian or bisexual women being their neighbour, manager, GP or prime minister. But levels of transgender comfort are lower. However, if we look at the same sample, 4 in 10 people say they think it's inappropriate for schools to teach a 6-year-old that being gay is acceptable. So we have this conflict in society where people are quite happy to say, we think it's okay if my boss is gay or my politician is gay or my prime minister is gay. But then half of people are saying, but I don't want my children to be taught that it's acceptable to be gay. And over 1/3 of people in the UK think that gay conversion therapy should remain legal. So again, we've got quite a big conflict with, I'm comfortable with it, but I don't want it on my doorstep. And homophobia at work, globally, one in 4 LGBTQ plus employees say they aren't out at work. So 25% of people that are gay say they're not out at work. Coming out at work is more challenging for women and junior employees if we look at the research. And around 80% of gay senior leaders say they're out, but that falls to just 58% of women and down to 32% for junior employees. So we see that if you're a man and you're senior like I am, it's more easy for you to come out. But as you get younger and as you become a woman or less senior, it becomes much, much more difficult for you to come out at work. And coming out at work was always something that I struggled with, mostly because the day I came out was just the start of that process. What felt like what should have been the end, that just became the beginning. And every single week for the last 20 years, I've had to come out. And as I don't conform to any of the gay stereotypes that most people believe, there's this weird assumption that I'm straight, and that default causes me problems. So when people assume you're married and you're married to a woman, it suddenly requires extra effort for me to correct them. So being honest, I really do that. And I find this quite psychologically draining. And most other people do as well. 60% of LGBTQ plus respondents to different parts of research say that needing to correct colleagues' assumptions about their personal lives was a stressful thing to do. And when people in the community are exposed to chronic stress, we become both physically and psychologically less resilient to normal life stresses. And so that kind of cognitive and emotional effort involved in construction and maintaining those facades is really taxing to people who belong to the community. And so we can start to see that even allowing the smallest amounts of homophobia into organizations is not good for us or the mental health of those within this community. And the way we're treated by our managers have a really long-lasting negative impact on us. So long after somebody has stopped being our manager or leader, the way they treat us can have really sustained effects on our lives. And recent research looked at how coach leadership in professional sports, specifically the NBA, could show us this. And the research controlled for tenure, salary, team winning percentages, absence due to injuries, multi-level modeling, all this kind of stuff. And what they found is if you have a slightly abusive leadership influence, both the trajectory of psychological aggression and your task performance over players' careers showed that those players with an aggressive coach saw this negatively impact the rest of their careers. So it didn't matter how long somebody had a bad manager or bad coach, when they were treated negatively by them, that impacted the rest of their lives. And this kind of profoundly negative effect on people, we've heard it already today, but there's some really obvious ways, or maybe not obvious ways, that it starts to affect people. So I hear in my life common phrases that aren't outwardly homophobic, but I hear things like, I don't like having it thrown in my face, or I love gay people, or when I've checked into a hotel and I've asked for a double room and my partner's been next to me and somebody's corrected me and said, oh, you booked a double room, assuming that we should have needed 2 singles. And then things like, oh, you're a handsome man, you being gay is a waste. This is all homophobic behavior because this is all telling me that I am different. So it's a waste that I'm a gay man because that's showing me that actually heterosexuality is the norm and the preferred. And so I was really keen that at Benefex, we did something about this and we created a safe space. So this is what Benefex did. We promoted dialogue and we weren't afraid of having uncomfortable conversations. So the image we've got up of the butterfly and the kind of caterpillar or snail. So driven by one of our copywriters campaigning, we added pronouns to our email signatures because it normalized discussions about gender and it challenged this historical view of gender. And we felt this was a really important move towards inclusivity because it shows us that we care about individuals' preferences. It's a safe space for people to bring their whole selves to work. And even our CEO and Chief People Officer both made sure they used pronouns in their emails, so the support was seen from the top down. And the research shows you that when you do this in your organization, something as simple as putting your pronouns on your social media handles or in your email trails, that actually improves the environment. So people who are transgender living in or non-binary living in those and working in those environments report feeling better just because you've made that very small change to how you talk about yourself at work. What we also did was added diversity to our employer brand and celebrated those diverse humans who work with us while openly acknowledging their challenges. And we show gratitude for these people. So we asked every single employee anonymously about their experiences if they were part of the LGBTQ plus communities. And we also asked them about their mental health and how they'd struggled with their mental health. And we were really, really surprised at the hidden diversity that existed in our organization. We had far more LGBTQ plus employees than we ever thought, and we had far more employees with a history of poor mental health than we ever thought. So we decided we need to ensure that not only our employees saw Benefex as a safe space, but that we created an environment that welcomed and encouraged applicants from diverse employees. So we launched a social media campaign to show off all of our people and our potential hires that we are a safe space. And to this day, it's one of the most successful marketing exercises we have ever done in the company's history. And even though that wasn't the point, that's obviously tells you kind of how interesting this is to people. And so for the sake of time, I'm just going to focus on the LGBTQ plus campaign, but our mental health campaign was very, very similar. So we asked LGBTQ plus employees to share their experiences with us at work. And we discovered that we didn't just employ 2 gay men, which is what most of us thought. We actually had quite a few bisexual, pansexual, non-binary, gay men, gay women, and transgender women. And so the process made us realize we were far more diverse than we actually thought. And so we knew we had to use their experiences to educate the rest of our workforce to raise awareness. And so we asked them about what it was like being LGBTQ plus at work. And here are the few things that they had to say. So one of our employees said, "I'm conscious of my privileges. I'm a white, British, cisgender male. My experience is going to be a lot more positive than other members of the LGBTQ+ community. But lucky isn't a word that one person should have to use when talking about how they're treated in the workplace." And this one really struck me at the time. We had employees who felt lucky because they hadn't been treated badly because of their sexual preference. And that is no way for anyone to be living their life. And on the next slide, somebody told us, "My experiences of being LGBTQ+ in the workplace have largely been negative ones. Because of that, I don't tend to out myself right away at a new workplace, as I never know how people are going to react. And the last thing I want to do is make my work environment an uncomfortable one." So we had people telling us that they didn't come out of work because their past experiences were setting the scene for what would happen next. And so, devastating for all of us as senior management teams to hear stories of people that were working in our organization that were afraid to come out because of their past experiences. And the next quote, which really kind of threw me, one of our transgender employees, which I didn't even know was transgender, and there's no way that I should have, told me that having to change my name during employed life, it was clear the system isn't built to handle the unique situations LGBTQ+ people have. Without exhaustive and sometimes expensive proof, the work of many years can be undone by an automatically ticked checkbox, forcing you into a new place with new people as if unfinished, forced out, and to explain the discrepancy between who you are in person and what you are on paper. And this employee told us this can scare people away from employment or foster unhealthy relationships between employee and employer even before the job has started. And so what we started to see then was that people were being held back at work because of admin, because the person that they were living their life as didn't match the paperwork. And so that started this uncomfortable conversation. But we also asked them how they felt about Benefex. And we were really intrigued to find out, based on their really poor experiences outside of Benefex, what was life like at Benefex. And they told us, "The ethos and understanding at Benefex is amazing. I haven't faced any prejudice and have been accepted for myself from the minute I first walked in. Having good people around me at Benefex has made me realize that loving someone regardless of gender and having a fluid sexuality does not make me greedy or confused. Now I definitely feel more secure in my sexuality and I feel less pressure to fit in and fit myself in a box." And one employee told us, "I'm proud to say I came out while at Benefex. I was scared of how people would react, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of support and love that I was shown by my colleagues. What really helped was knowing that Benefex embraced LGBTQ+ employees for who they are, not who they love or how they identify. It's something I really admire about the company and everyone who works here." And so that last testimony really showed us that the work we'd done paid off, because we created an environment that somebody felt like they could come out. And this person later told me that they'd been through numerous jobs where they'd hidden this. And we created this environment by doing some very, very simple things to welcome the people in. So my advice, as we've gone through all of this, what you can do in your organization: celebrating pride, changing your logo. It's a great thing to do to show support, but it can't just be the only thing that you do. And so give your people permission to be themselves. Promote allies of LGBTQ+ people, especially at the top of the organization. Lift marginalized voices. As I mentioned at the start, although I don't have a lived experience as a Black person or a woman, I have used my platform where I can to raise those voices. And that's a very easy thing for us to do, whether we're part of those groups or not. Think about the language you use. Language and words are really, really important to our society. So using pronouns frequently in your organization, encouraging others to speak up about the ones that you'd like to see. Refer to LGBTQ+ relationships in the same way that you refer to straight ones. Stop making assumptions about people. I would love to live in this kind of futuristic world that we've seen on Doctor Who, where we don't assume anyone fancies any type of person or falls in love with any other type of person. We make the assumption that we don't know what their sexual preference is or how they want to identify. And we have to create a physically safe space. So barriers faced by transgender employees range from organizational oversight, such as lack of access to bathroom facilities. Family policies need to be adjusted to suit a modern family, which includes a single gay man who might have caregiving responsibilities. The 2.4 children just isn't applicable to most people anymore. Offer LGBTQ+ friendly benefits. I spoke about this at a Benefex conference about 4 years ago, and I was told by a customer that this wasn't an issue. Offering trans coverage as part of your private medical scheme is the best thing you will ever be able to do for a trans employee. You will literally change their life. And so I think when we talk about employee engagement at work, being able to increase the engagement so high of those people, I think is going to be, it's one of the most amazing things I think we could probably do for somebody, is to give them the life they always felt like they should have been living. Protect your diverse employees from third-party providers and customers. Don't work with providers who don't have a good enough diversity policies. And listen to your staff when they tell you things like, a customer supports conversion therapy. The customer is not always right. Try reverse mentoring. Let people at the top have the opportunity to understand the plight of their LGBTQ+ employees, even if they're not part of that community. And make as many kind of wide and public commitments to LGBT employees as possible. And I'll leave you with this last slide and this last thought. I am a confident, successful, 6'4", 17-stone man. I'm not afraid of much in life, and I've been out for almost 20 years and with my partner for the last 8 years. I have no issue at all with being gay. I hold a senior position at a company that has embraced and celebrated me for a decade. But I have never felt comfortable enough to ever dance with my partner in a bar or wedding or hold his hand in the street. And I'm choking up just saying that out loud. When I knew I was gay, but I was scared or not able to come out, my life was very dark and nobody knew that. I was able to hide the extreme sadness I lived in my life. And the only way for me to describe what it felt like at the time was that I was living a life that felt like I was halfway between life and death. And there is very likely somebody you know today who is feeling exactly the same way, and they are working in your organization. In 2020, 40% of LGBTQ+ people say they've seriously considered suicide because of who they are. Creating safe spaces for LGBTQ+ employees is literally saving lives. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this today.
Wow. Thank you so much, Gethin. Just absolutely beautiful, powerful stuff. A couple of things I picked up, the absence of impediment. Those of us that have the absence of impediment, then we probably don't understand what it must feel like to have those daily exhausting barriers to overcome. Another thing which I think we've not touched on until your session was the need to equality impact our policies, our systems, because we design them, use a different example, but if you're right-handed, you don't think about what left-handed people might need. We do the same thing in terms of our inclusive or exclusive approach to how we design working life. Visible support from the top seemed to be a really clear marker that you were putting down. It'd be interesting to see whether that's a theme that comes through in the chat afterwards. And creating the right environment. I remember from work I did many years ago. Together We Make the Difference sounded very similar, and this was in the NHS, but sounded very similar to the kind of campaign that you ran. And what a difference it makes when people can see themselves in the organisation and know that they fit and will be supported. So thank you so much for those fantastic insights. The idea of lifting marginal voices is really important for all of us, regardless of our own background. So we now come to the end of our plenary speakers. Gethin, thank you so much for sending us off with fantastic thoughts. I'm hoping we've got those slides captured. I know a few people will be shooting off, but we now move into the final breakout where Joe has prepared a beautiful collection of some of the voices on speaking out for people to have a perusal. If we can take about 15 minutes or so there, and then come back for our final 2 panel sessions. I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.